So we'll be discussing about Databricks now. So we were um, discussed about Azure Data Factory and how the data can be bring from multiple sources, and how we can do some actions on the files and as well as the content, right? So now what is Databricks, right? So that's what we are going to discuss, and particularly Azure Databricks. Okay, and how, what the benefits of Azure Databricks and how Azure Databricks can help in this big data processing, right? So remember, our objective is to do the big data analytics, right? We need to process the vast amount of data at scale, right? So what are the some of the shortfalls of Azure Data Factory, so that we need a data bricks? Okay, that's what we're going to discuss. So in this one, we're going to broadly discussing about the data bricks architecture, how the data flows, right? What are the different processing that Azure Databricks right now supports, which is a leading one of the leading market has one of the leading market share in the big data. Okay, and also we will be discussing about the main concepts as usual. So what is interface, user, REST APIs, and dashboard, notebooks, libraries, all the stuff we are going to discuss. Okay, and and then we also um, we're going to be discussing about the cluster types. Okay, so what are the different cluster types, notebook options? So what exactly, how exactly the Azure Databricks engine works, right? What kind of compute and what kind of infra, what kind of storage required. So all this stuff we are going to discuss, and we will be creating some clusters for our purpose to do the data processing, and we'll be writing using some notebooks, right? So all the details we are going to do that. So to
Sir,
will
sorry for the interrupt, sir. So before entering to the Databricks, should we aware of the SQL? Because I don't know the SQL. I need to start.
Mhm. So again, right? See, we highly touched upon about SQL in our Azure Data Factory also, right? So with that, I think you should be able to manage. There is no you need to get into the specialized course or anything. Okay, but if you have time, just brush up yourself in terms of learn some of the SQL concepts,
Okay, sir.
right? See, one of the beauty of having the Databricks is it supports multiple languages, and all the supporting APIs are already there. You just need to you just need to know which API to be called when, based on the requirement and all. Okay, so yeah, so we'll be discussing about the clusters, right? Notebooks, and we'll also will what is a notebook and what are the different options available, what is different cells, etc., etc. We're going to discuss. Okay, and similarly, like ADF, we're also going to discuss about the parameters, right? How do we pass the parameters to notebooks, and some of the utility functions available that Databricks automatically supports. Okay, so those all we'll be discussing, and of course, variables and widget types. This is a new term you might be hearing first time. So we also discuss about the widget types and all. Okay, so what is widget? How do we create widget types that we can pass to associate with the notebook and all? Okay, and also we finally we also need to integrate these services, right? So see, assume that the blob storage, what we ADLS blob storage we've been dealing with so far. I mean, in our Azure Data Factory. So when the data comes to Azure Blob Storage, how do we get that process by Databricks, right? So how do we integrate that? So what are the some of the configurations we have to do to access the different storage services? Okay, and then we'll again the key vault service. Okay, so we know what is key vault we discussed. Okay, then how that can be used in Azure Databricks also we will see, and also reading different format files, multiple files, right? And another concept is a data frame. So what is data frame, right? So that's again a new term in when it comes to the Databricks. We will be doing that as well, and also we'll be discussing different formats like Parquet, that what we did in Azure Data Factory, similar like Parquet, or Avro, ORC, all those file formats. Also, we'll be discussing along with CSV. Okay, and then of course the uh, data lake we will be discussing, and how we can integrate with the Azure SQL database, right? So we need to integrate the SQL database also. So we'll be integrating and reading, writing some of the tables and doing some of the stuff using the PySpark and all, the Databricks. Okay. Now after that will be see one of the beauty of this Azure Databricks is you can install your own libraries, right? If you have any project specific libraries or anything that you want to bring from outside, you can install that as well. So we'll be discussing those options as well. Okay, and finally the PySpark will come into that. Okay, so PySpark is what is PySpark? What is before PySpark? What is Spark? Right, and then we'll discuss about the PySpark, and we'll discuss about some of the APIs available that we'll be using day in day out in our regular work. Okay, and then one of the concept of PySpark is creating the RDDs, right? What is RDD? How it will work? How it will evaluate the certain internally how it works and all we will discuss. Okay, and some of the transformations using the RDD, and then we are also going to use Spark SQL, right? How to write uh, a data frames using the SQL when you're dealing with the relational data. So you need a SQL over there. So what are the different APIs are available to support this? So all the stuff we are going to discuss. Okay, this is very important topic to understand, because Spark is one of the leading big data process engine that across the industry, multiple many customers are using. And when you go to even for any as a data engineering as a data engineer, it's very essential for you to understand the Spark concepts. Okay, and all these joins, everything we know already. Some of them we already done, right? So how they can be done in this way, using the notebook data bricks, we will be discussing this, right? Okay, so that's about the data bricks that we're planning to do that now. So we to do that, so normally what happens is, let me open portal. So when you go to portal, if you see Azure Databricks is a service, right? So this is what we're going to discuss. Okay. So now let's see. Right now, nothing is there. Let's see to create a Azure Databricks service. So basically, if you see, it's creating a workspace for you to interact with the Spark. Okay, so Azure Databricks is basically a Spark engine behind the scenes. Okay, so Spark is one of the leading big data processing engine, and Databricks as a company which supports the uh, which commercializes and take care of the Spark maintenance everything, and it helps enterprises to use the Spark and to process their big data analytics. Okay, so now if you, there are two ways to do that. One, when you create a Azure Databricks workspace over here, it internally uses the let me do that. See, Databricks is a company basically. Okay, so Databricks basically uses these guys are the okay. So let me talk about that before we get into here, right? So Databricks is basically it's an analytical platform, right? And it was created by the inventors of the Spark. Okay, so the Spark is basically an open source project, which basically uses the in memory kind of a stuff to do the big data. Okay, which we are going to discuss in detail when we get into that, right? So now Databricks is a company which has tied up with Azure, which is customized for Azure to integrate with the different Azure services and all to do the big data processing. Okay, that's why it's called a Azure Databricks. Okay, now Azure Databricks workspace you can create from the Azure portal and you can use that. Okay, but that's not a free. You need to pay for that. Okay, we don't have a though you're using a free account from Microsoft, but Azure Databricks service is not a free. You can launch the Azure workspace, but you have to pay for that. Okay, so for that for our training purpose, what we can do is uh, this guys Databricks. These guys provides a community based services for only for learning. Okay, so for us in case of learning purpose, we will be using this community edition, and it's completely free forever. Okay, it's not like a Azure like Microsoft. It's only 30 days period. Okay, so you can create your own account. Uh, it just takes just email and password. Okay, and we'll be using this workspace in our day-to-day activities. Okay, so this is just for our reference purpose in terms of the how the service is working and all, but we are not going to do anything over here because that's going to cost us all the stuff we are going to do over here. And this is the same thing where even if you create a workspace, it internally calls the same stuff. Okay, so now you can see there are so many stuff over here: workspace, recents, data, compute, workflows, right? Settings, all the stuff we're going to do that. Okay, and we're going to create our own workspace. You can see when you say create a notebook, right? So what is notebook? What are the different options are available, right? How do we use notebooks to create our jobs to process the big data, right? All the stuff we are going to do that. You can see this is it's a very intuitive way of working with Azure Databricks, right? So notebook contains multiple cells. You can create multiple cells over here. right? And you can execute the commands over there. So when you run this notebook, all those commands are going to be executed automatically. Okay. For example, let's say I wanted to do some 100 plus 100. I want to do a simple calculation, right? Let's run it. Now you see whenever you run, attach a cluster. Okay, so what is a cluster? Right, we already discussed it when we are doing in Azure Data Flow, dealing with, we are creating cluster to do the mapping, data flow, etc. Right. So similarly, that is basically a the integration. If you remember the integration runtime clusters we were using when we do the when you bring the data from multiple sources and do the transformations and all. Right. Similarly, anything and everything we do in Azure Databricks, you need a cluster. Cluster is nothing but is a compute, right? It's a compute that Azure Databricks uses internally to do this. For example, if you see 100 plus 100, this is basically a math, right? So even for this, it needs a compute to calculate what is 100 plus 100. Okay, and there are different cluster types are available. There are different, run times that you can use it. Okay, since we are using community based edition, so it's a very limited options are available for us to do the ones. Okay, but nevertheless they're important and they're okay for us to continue. Okay, for example, if you see free 15 GB memory as a community edition user, your cluster will automatically terminate after an idle period of 1 to 2 hours. Okay, so we'll be getting 0 workers and it's just one driver and 15 GB of memory, 2 cores, and one database unit we are going to get as part of our community edition. Okay, and that's going to we are going to use across during our learning. Okay, um, even if you want to process a kind of a human, you will not be able to get it the required compute power. Okay, so we need to live with the community based what is default is given to us. If you want to do any projects and all, we can live with this, or if you need any higher configuration, you need to buy on your own. Okay, that's the cost is you need to break it. Okay, so right now we do not have anything, nothing is coming out here. And when we create a cluster, so the cluster will come with the runtime. We are going to use it, right? And you can see everywhere everywhere you will be looking at Scala Spark. Okay, so what is Scala? Right, it's a new term again, right? So we will be discussing those as well, those things as well. Okay, and then workspace. What is workspace? Right? What can be shared? What cannot be shared? Right? How do I collaborate with my team? Right? So since you and me are in the same team, right? You will be doing some portion. I will be doing some portion. So how do we collaborate with each other? Right? So that's the way you can create workspace and share across. Okay. So you can see you can share the shared workspace or users, right? So user specific, others cannot see that. Shared ones, others can you can share with others people, right? So all the stuff we're going to discuss, and some of the data by default. Also, you can create our own tables in Databricks, right? So so far we've been dealing with SQL tables, but Azure Databricks also gives we can create our own data, bring our own data, create our own schema and databases. You can see tables and etc. You can create our own stuff. Okay, so we'll be discussing those as well. And as I discussed, right, the compute powers. You can create more than one compute also. Okay, and you can track all the computes available are created by you, right? And then their memory, their cores, and their DBUs, their capacity, everything can be, you can see it over here. That is available to you for your workspace. Okay, and then workflows, right? So what are the workflows? How do we create a workflow, and how do we create a jobs, right? And how do we manage those jobs to run a particular activity, right? So all those stuff we are going to discuss. Okay, so that's about Databricks and all. Okay, so as we said, there are a lot of stuff, interesting stuff. We're going to do that, and some of the our existing services we've been using uh, uh, in Azure, for example, the subscription is going to be remain same, and the keyword where it's going to remain same, and the SQL database that we already created in our earlier, we are going to use the same stuff, and our storage accounts we are going to use the same stuff, right? So some of the services we are going to reuse and in the same Azure data bricks, and some of them we can create new ones as and when it requires. Okay, so that's about the stuff. Now let's quickly discuss. So what is Azure Data Bricks? As I said, Databricks is an Apache Spark-based analytics platform optimized for Microsoft Azure Cloud platform, right? So what is Apache Spark? Apache Spark is a very powerful big data processing engine. It's a platform, okay, used for big data analytics at scale to process the big data kind of a volume, variety, and huge data if you want to process. Which is a Spark-based engine that uses internally, which is basically an in-memory processing engine to do the big data analytics. Okay, so now Apache Spark is an open source. Open source. It's available across anybody. Okay, even you can download that project and you can use it for your analytics purpose also without Databricks. Okay, so now what is Databricks, right? So Databricks basically designed by the founders of same Apache Spark. So whoever the founders of Apache Spark, they had come together to establish this organization called Databricks. Okay, so Databricks is basically integrated with Azure to provide one-click setup, streamline workflows, and interactive workspace. As we discussed through just now, it's just a clicks. It's all based on clicks. You need not deep dive into what's happening in the background, how those things are, how the Spark engine, the different configurations being used for in your workspace. You need not break your head. It's just a one click. You just need to select. You just need to create an account and you just use it for your workspace, right? So that's the idea of Databricks. Okay, and also you can collaborate with your other people like data engineers, scientists, business analysts across the organization. Okay, so in a nutshell, Databricks is a unified set of tools building, deploying, and sharing, maintaining enterprise grade data solutions at scale. Okay, now visualize this picture. It will give you more in terms of what we discussed just now. So we have a different people, right? Some from data science, some from engineering, some from businesses, and within that business there are multiple lines of businesses, so on and so forth. Okay, so now what Databricks will come into as a middle layer. So it has workspaces, it has workflows, runtimes, right, and services, serverless services across by using the Spark. Okay, and that internally connects to the Azure Blob Storage, Data Lake, Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Apache Kafka, Hadoop, everything. Okay, so if you are new to Apache Kafka, Hadoop, just hold on. Okay, don't worry. I will quickly touch upon what is Kafka and all in our further sessions. Okay, and then it processes the data and finally gives the data in such a way that that can be consumed and used by rest of the applications for the ML use cases, right? There may be deep learning model and there may be SQL warehouse and there may be Power BI report and so on and so forth. All the consumers can use the data in ready-made and they can get some insights and take it to the next level, right? So if you see, there are two people. One is the data generators and the data consumers. In between, Azure Databricks will fit into, and it will give you an intuitive environment to process the data at scale and using the Spark, and then the data can be used by the multiple applications. Okay, so some of the scenarios could be within as I mentioned, right? So you have different apps, right? As I mentioned, as we discussed earlier, we have a Oracle apps, we have a Salesforce, that data is coming from Salesforce, Oracle, and different stuff, right? So that can be taken care by data factory, that we know, right? So there are some custom apps, right? There are some sensors and devices, right? I'm getting some IoT data, right? So I'm getting some data using IoT devices, and I'm getting some data from sensors and other stuff, and I'm also getting some streamlining data from my video analytics, right? For those kind of analytics, Azure Data Factory might not be the right solution. So that's where we use the Azure Databricks. Okay, so that data will bring using the connectors like Event Hub, IoT Hub, and using the Kafka, will bring the data to Azure Blob Storage, and then we'll use the Azure Databricks to process the data to be in such a way that that can be useful for either we can store the data in Cosmos DB, SQL DT, database, warehouse, etc. And then eventually that can be consumed by the intelligence suite of applications like uh, predictive modeling, deep learning models, ML, AI, ML use cases, or the operational reports like Power BI or the dashboards. Okay, so that's the scenario where Databricks can be used. Okay, I hope you got what is the need of Databricks, what is Databricks, and what is the need of Databricks, and how that going to be used in an enterprise.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's that's about the scenario that the Databricks can fit into in our analytic workload. And of course, there are we were talking about Apache Spark, right? So what is Spark? Spark is basically is in-memory big data processing engine. Okay, and we will discuss in detail, of course, in a further this one. But this is a in-memory big data process engine, which is fast, right? And it has an ecosystem of streaming and processing, relational, non-relational, machine learning, graph, all the kind of data. It has the capabilities of processing that. right? And it support rich APIs. Okay, and Spark basically written in a Scala. Scala is a programming languages similar to Java. Okay, and but that doesn't mean that to work with Spark we need to learn Scala or Java, right? Because it has a rich support of APIs. So we have Python, we have R, and we have SQL, and all the stuff we can do. Um, we can interact with using those APIs. We can interact with Spark. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So some of the important concepts that we just touched upon, right? What is workspace? All right. So imagine you and your team, right? Both are working on same analytic use case, right? And you will be creating some stuff on your own, and the other team member he'll be also creating some stuff for himself, right? So now how do you collaborate between the team members? That is where your workspace will come into picture, right? So it's basically accessing all the related database assets together. As a team we need to access. I need to know what you are doing and you need to know what I'm doing, so that we will not work in a silos, uh, and it's a common purpose, and we wanted to know each other, right? So that's about what is a workspace and how do we create a workspace, and all. Now we some of the access controls, right? So as we work in a real time, it's not everything is available for everyone, right? We need to manage some access controls. Like for example, I may have access to something, you may have access to something, right? And depending on our role, depending on the need, the certain access controls been granted to us. All right. And also we discussed like high level what is notebook, right? How the web-based interface creating a workflow that contains all the runnable commands, configurations, everything. Okay, we discussed high level notebook, and we are going to all our next classes are going to be on the notebooks, right? So we'll be hearing and we'll be learning more about the notebooks. Of course, libraries is anything library in any other languages, right? For example, you are from C plus or a Java. If you know, there are a lot of libraries being daily. Some of the libraries is coming out, right? So if you want to use those libraries, you need to install those libraries in and bring to our workspace. Okay, so now we will also install some of the libraries required for our uh, CSV and Excel processing, and we will discuss more about that. And also Databricks file system, right? So Databricks internally manages its own file system. Okay, to have uh, uh, all the data that is coming to a Databricks, it maintains its own way, right? For example, you have some data in blob storage, you want to process it. So bring the blob storage data to Databricks file system, and then and processing accordingly. Okay, so that is the uh, one of the benefit, that you can bring your own data and then create the database. We just discussed it, right? We saw it we saw it in um, the community edition. What is a database tables, right? And also metastore. What is metastore? Metastore is basically to keep data of data, right? For example, I have a table, right? So what is the table? Who has created? When it was created? All the metadata I can automatically capture, Databricks automatically captures and stores it in the metastore. Okay. So whenever you create a table, all this metadata going to be created automatically. You need not do anything manually. And that can be accessible through metastore, and that can be used across your other purposes. Okay. And we touched upon cluster. So what is a cluster? Like similar to our integration runtime in ADF, and also uh, um, similar to that, to do the compute, and to it requires some storage and compute, right? So that we will get in the form of cluster, right? We discussed the high level what is cluster and how you can create a cluster and how you can manage different clusters, and what are the some of the limitations of cluster when using the community edition, right? And also the Databricks runtime, which is a core component of running any clusters in the data Azure Databricks. Without Databricks runtime, nothing works, right? It's a main heart of the Databricks. Okay, and of course the workflows. So how do you design your own workflows and create jobs to do certain activities on your own, right? It's not always an individual. You might have to create a job. You might have to uh, schedule a job, right, to run in a particular interval, right? So all the stuff that is called the workflows, you can design your own workflow and then schedule it, and as per the schedule, the workflow automatically runs and process the data as it requires. All right, guys. So that's about very quick introduction about Azure Databricks. Okay, I know you, since it's a first class, you might have some questions. Okay, please hold on those questions. Okay, and if you understand, good. If you didn't understand, take out those questions and keep it in, note it down those questions in a way where though you will get answers as we progress in our next class. Okay, and even if you didn't get, you can ask in those next classes how we can. I will try to answer. Okay, but from the today's class, I just wanted to make sure that you understand what is Databricks, what it does internally, and how it works, right? And what are the some of the scenarios where enterprises can use the Databricks. All right, guys. So that's about for today's session. Any questions?
Sir, in this community edition, we can use only one cluster, right?
Yes, that's the that's the limitation. Yeah. I think the 15 GB 15 GB, sorry, 15 GB, what are they providing? I think that's more than enough,
Yes.
right? So we don't foresee anything, the data that we process more than 15 GB, it's
Okay.
required, but yeah. Yes, that's a good point. So so create your own community account,
Yes, sir.
right? The way we created, the way we created, the way we created in Azure. Similarly, you create your own account so that it will be available. Will be using in day in day out from tomorrow onwards.
Okay.
Okay. I'll just ping you that URL so that you
It doesn't ask anything like credit card and
no, nothing. Don't worry. Yeah, nothing. It's just a community free forever. It doesn't
Oh,
have any limitation also. You can
okay,
do,
sir.
you can continue 3 months, 6 months, forever. It doesn't ask anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So I know it's a first class. Uh, I don't want to bombard with too much of information, but just to give you a glimpse of what's coming up and how do we plan to do uh, the plan to learn the syllabus with Azure Databricks and some of the concepts and all. Okay, so from tomorrow onwards, we'll be full fledged and we'll be moving towards our planned syllabus. Okay, be prepared and be active and ask right questions. I will try to answer. And if you have any questions related to Azure Data Factory, you can ping me over WhatsApp. You can discuss there as
Okay, sir.
well. All right.
Yes.
Chalo, I think we are good to go for today, and we'll talk to you soon tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.